Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first meeting of the new year, January 13th, our regular town council meeting. I'd like to officially call this meeting to order at 6 p.m. Madam Clerk, will you please take a roll call?
Councilman Gutenberg,
Here.
Councilman McCormick,
Here.
Councilman Sampson,
Here.
Councilman Johnson,
Here.
Mayor James.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. And if you all would please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Council, if you have had a moment to look at tonight's agenda, I will entertain a motion of approval.
So.
Thank you very much. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And we have, I'm going to read we had a closed session on December 16th, and in accordance with the Maryland Open Meetings Act, General Provisions, Article 3-211, we are required to include specific information in the minutes when a public body meets in closed session. To ensure full compliance, we have attached the written statement that includes the reason for closing the meeting, the statutory authority permitting the closed session, a listing of topics discussed, the individuals present, and the action taken. This documentation has been made part of the public record to maintain transparency and meet the legal requirements of the Act. Next on the agenda is our consent agenda. If you've had an opportunity to review that, I will entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda. Thank you very much. Do I have a second?
Second.
Great. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. This brings us to the portion of our agenda that is for public comment. I know that Ms. Turner, you have signed up to speak. Would you like to speak now, please? And I ask that you state your name, whether you live within the incorporated town limits, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. And the floor is yours.
My name is Rebecca Turner, and I live within the town of La Plata. I have two concerns today. One is sewage. I advised my neighbor, Mike Medatic, to come before this body when he noticed sewage in the stream near my house. I heard staff say afterwards that the sewage plant was working well. I thought the problem was solved, only to read in the Bay Journal that the sewage leaks have continued through this past December, a year, and that the town of La Plata lied to Mr. Medatic, and that the Maryland Department of the Environment has also ignored the problem, forcing the Potomac Riverkeeper to become involved. I heard last night the Potomac River disparaged in public because La Plata's penalty money will go to its lawyers and some kelp bed. It seems to me that the town of La Plata lost its chance to work with MDE by ignoring and lying, while our water, which used to support fish and which my dogs used to play in, got polluted. That's when the Riverkeeper stepped in to spend its money on water samples and lawsuits. The second concern I have is water. I heard last night in public that the traffic crisis caused by the Pine Grove development has a solution. What is that solution? La Plata buys PFAS-loaded water from the Potomac River. But don't worry, it's also more expensive. All our water bills will go up. And how will this solve the traffic? Well, the town of La Plata kept secret the fact that there wasn't enough water for Pine Grove and the future developments it annexed into the town without purchased water. So now in order to finish La Plata Parkway, we have to drink polluted river water. We know we lose 30% of our municipal water to leakage. We know we could encourage water conservation. We know that we could save rainwater and recharge the aquifers. And yet, to my knowledge, nothing is being done. Instead, we negotiate for river water. To an observer, it looks as though La Plata wants the water crisis so that it can buy water for developers, who then take their profits out of the state and leave us with long-term obligations to these developments that we can never recoup with taxes, causing us to develop more to get more money in a continuous downward spiral. I have in mind a La Plata which is sustainable, which has streams clear of sewage, and which doesn't lie to its constituents. I hope you can do better.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak this evening? All right, seeing none, we are going on to our matters of council discussion. The first discussion is charter amendments. Mr. Stevens.
All right. Good evening, council. I'm Chuck Stevens. I'm your town manager. I'm going to give your staff report this evening on, well, actually, this is the first of a handful. You're going to hear a lot from me tonight. Okay, the first item today is charter amendments. So town council expressed to staff in September at a meeting in September a desire to update certain sections of the town charter. Specifically, council has a desire to review and update Article 3, Section C3-3, salary of councilman. Article 4, the mayor, Section C4-2, the salary of the mayor. Article 5, town manager, Section C5-1, the appointment of the town manager. And Article 9, personnel, Section C9-2, the town attorney. And there was a fifth charter amendment that was also proposed in September that's going to require more work. So we're not considering that here this evening. And that was a conversation about language around resign to run. If an elected official has a desire to run for another elected office, they would need to resign this seat. That's going to take more work. So that is not being considered tonight, just the four that I mentioned just a moment ago. Revisions to the town charter are governed by the Annotated Code of Maryland, Local Government Title 4, Subtitle 3. And they follow a strictly defined sequence of events. In your packet, we lay that out, but I am going to hit some of the highlights for you here in my report. It's very particular about every step along the way when you're changing your charter. We need to be incredibly intentional and thoughtful as we go through it. Even how we count the days when there's a number of days required between events, and we need to be very mindful about how we count the days. So for example, Sundays and legal holidays are included in the time periods exceeding 7 days, and that's in the Maryland General Provisions, and the code section is in your agenda packet. Additionally, an amendment to a municipal charter may be initiated by the municipality's legislative body or by a petition signed by at least 20% of the qualified voters. In this case, the legislative body is seeking this change. Each proposed amendment must be presented with specific formatting and adopted by resolution. Prior to adopting a charter amendment via resolution, the municipality's legislative body must hold a public hearing on the proposed amendment and give at least 21 days advance notice of the public hearing. The municipality's chief executive officer shall post an exact copy of the resolution at the main municipal building for 40 days following adoption. The chief executive officer must also publish a fair summary of the proposed amendment in a newspaper of general circulation in the municipality at least 4 times at weekly intervals within the 40 days after adoption, or publish a fair summary of the proposed amendment in a newspaper of general circulation in the municipality at least once, and deliver a copy of the fair summary by hand or by mail once to every resident in the municipality. Once adopted, an amendment proposal may only be rescinded via another charter amendment. And once effective, information concerning the charter amendment must be sent to the Maryland State Department of Legislative Services. Within your packet, there was a table there that highlights some of the significant events and the timelines that are associated with them. And when you add all of that up, the time required to effect an amendment to the town charter is 79 days, including, and these are some of the factors that we have to consider, the notice of the public hearing, which has to happen at least 21 days prior to the event, the public hearing itself, the introduction of the charter amendment resolution, which can occur on the same date as the public hearing, There needs to be a window for referendum by petition of the voters. There needs to be the published of the fair summary 4 times in the newspaper, or and then the exact copy of the resolution needs to be posted in this case in town hall, and that needs to occur for 40 days following the adoption. And then the effective date of the charter amendment can be 50 days following adoption. Any additional initiatives for community engagement, such as public workshops, forming charter review committees, or holding public hearing record open for additional comment, would of course extend that adoption timeline. So the earliest, the soonest that the town could bring a public hearing before you and a resolution would be your February 24th meeting. We could meet all of the timeline gates that we need to meet and have a resolution and conduct the public hearing for you on these changes, if that is council's desire. The fiscal impact of these changes. Of course, any amendments that would establish a permanent change to department staffing could cause an increase in annual payroll expenses and associated benefits. That is not the case with these 4 charter amendments that we are talking about. There are no anticipated fiscal impacts associated with the 4 that we are discussing. Within your packet, we also lay out for you your strategic plan alignment and your sustainability and ADA considerations. This evening, council staff's recommendation is that we initiate the charter review process and bring that for you for a hearing and a resolution on your February 24th meeting. And with that, I will pause and answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you very much. Councilman Gutenberg, do you have any comments?
My comment on this is really, I'm glad we're moving this forward. It's just really just one question. I want to make sure that when we originally considered the agenda topic, there was a 5th charter amendment proposed in there. And so what I'd like to see is, and I think the consensus that night is that whole set of charter amendments would travel together. And so that remains my intent with what I think we're doing here. So I'll just offer that for discussion as we go forward.
Councilman McCormick?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for putting this together. Well informed. Appreciate the dates and all that. I have no comment other than unless something crazy happens with future questioning and comments from you, Mr. Stevens, I support this.
Nope, I echo the councilman's position and comments. Same thing.
Councilman John?
Yes, thanks, Chuck and staff. Time frame, obviously, I checked with these. What's in this action is, as you stated, there's 2 types of way of doing it: the legislative body or through 20% voters. The intent of when I brought this forward was, I think everyone's well aware, was to make sure that this all come together. I recognize that your concern is this has not been done. It's not currently any language in Maryland that we can find, which is fine. We could be the first municipality or local government that does it. There should be no concern with the resign to run for many reasons. In Maryland, the Declaration of Rights, Article 35 states that no person shall hold any office at the same time. And if you're not committed to the body that you sit on, you should do the due diligence of focusing your focus on the partisan race that you may be running. So that's the intent of it. And it's unfortunate it's not here tonight before us for consideration to see what the language look like. However, I recognize the promise you made about it being fresh language, and you want a legal set of eyes on it to make sure that it meets the intent that it's going to deliver once it is enacted. So I am a champion of getting the public hearing scheduled in February. Obviously, that'll be at the will of the council, but appreciate you moving as quick as you did. I think we talked about this in October and it's back before us in January. So hopefully we see the 5th one sometime before the end of spring.
Thank you. I have a few comments too, and I am going to repeat my comments that were from last time. We have not updated the charter in a very long time, and I am excited that we are updating the charter, but I think we need to do this holistically. When we're taking just bits and pieces of a charter and tweaking the language on that, we need to look at the election section, the election section, and that's where resign to run would be in there, would be in the election area. That still has the wrong dates on it. And then it commits us to a primary as well, which may not be necessary because we run nonpartisan. So it should be if 12 people come out, then you have 12 choices at an election. Also, the language, and I want to put this on the record, I'm not a feminist on here, but they all say he instead of he, she, because it was back in the day when women did not run for council. And so it was just generic he. That needs to be looked at. There are several areas that need to be tweaked. And I would ask my fellow council members not to delay this, but to look at, which it will be a delay if we do this in totality. Do it one time and get it done. Let's roll our sleeves up, have a work session, go through this code, this charter, and see what needs to be done. And I don't know how we move forward. I know that a lot of this would not impact this sitting council because you can't, from my knowledge, and I'm not an attorney, you cannot impose any changes on a sitting council. It would take effect on for the next council. I don't want to do something half-baked. I want a really solid document, a solid charter to go forward on that. And I think there are several other areas that need to be addressed and need to be even just tweaked so it's stronger and clearer on that. I'll give an example too. The language that says the treasurer reports to the council. What do you mean by report? Do they report out or do they report in? That kind of language needs to be clearly defined because it is ambiguous. And that's where I think we have a really good opportunity. We have 5 people that really are enthusiastic about updating our charter. But it is my hope that we do it holistically instead of just piecemeal and not leave it for the next council to take up where we left off.
Comments, please. Thank you. Appreciate that. I think we're contemplating the charter and the code. The code govern elections, and that can be an agenda item for future reference if there's need to do that. Another comment is the charter section 8 does not say the town treasurer reports to us. They serve at the council's pleasure under the direct supervision of the town manager. So that language is pretty clear. They just serve at the pleasure of council. I don't want to lose sight of why these charter minutes were submitted. And I'm not looking forward to delaying them. I think as any other council member, such as I did, noticed something with a charter amendment language. To your point, we do a work session, or which should be given agenda item just like I did for consideration, and we move it forward at a later meeting. But tonight, I don't think there's any need to delay. If any member disagree with me, obviously you vote your conscience, but to give feedback or having the intent of what you just said, Madam Mayor, maybe agenda items for council's review at that time, probably more appropriate.
Thank you. And I hear you on that. And one of the ones, as you had expressed, was resign to run, and has Councilman Gutenberg has also said that we wanted to bring the 5 of them together. So the rush, there is no rush on that. Why not? Okay. And I will even concede, why not bring all 5 together instead of doing 2 public hearings, which is a drain on staff as well. Just getting, and it's an expense to our taxpayer doing publicizing 2 public hearings. When if we can get once we have a town attorney, if they can get eyes on it, it's either bring it forward or we kill it. We can't. It can't be done, or it can be done, and that's where I look. Bring it all together, But I do think that we do need to look at this holistically instead of piecemeal.
So I'll share an observation. So, something I've learned in our time here is that, when I look at what we've been able to do with the APFO to date, where we've moved LEOPS to date, the common thread, I think, of what I've been learning experientially here is that when we focus, we are able to move quick for government, right? And so when I compare it to like when we were looking as a town for years at LEOPS and Public Works together, and when we were doing other things with APFO and not quite, you know, closing on it. And so what I want to do is, you know, I agree with some of the things you're saying, Madam Mayor, I really do. But what I fear is that when we start lumping all of those things in, right, that we start grinding ourselves down. And so I think the way we move forward, in my view, is that we build on the consensus that we already had on the 5. And to Councilman Johnson's point, I agree. We are here for a very specific reason on those particular items. And so I would prefer that we move forward on the commitment that we've already made and in our consensus, and that then we, in future, we move on those other components of this that do cast a broader net. And I concede to you, it is needed.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Do you have any?
Yeah,
Uh,
sorry.
Go ahead.
I would just hope, you know, and to be fair, staff received direction and we presented this to work all of it, and staff wrote back 1, 2, or 3, or 4. And if it take them to bring back to February to do another hearing. But I think the direction from council, which was unanimous, was extremely clear. And these items were submitted for a very specific reason. And I will hope that tonight, council will agree with me, giving direction to Mr. Stevens to move this item forward and schedule for public hearing in February.
Okay, so at this time, I will take, it will be a consensus. Is that right, Mr. Stevens? Just to,
Do I need to make a motion to be clear?
I think there needs to be a motion, and I thought that the rules that we were going to use, Madam Mayor, was that if it was unanimous, we would do just a voice vote, but if there was going to be any dissension, that we would do a roll call.
Okay.
And I'm not sure, based on the conversation, if you've got any unanimous tonight.
we'll do a roll call.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so first we should make a motion.
Yes, please.
All right, Madam Mayor, I make a motion that we move forward the 4 charter amendments that's presented tonight in the agenda packet for public hearing on February 23rd, you said, Mr. Stevens?
February 24th.
February 24th, thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Madam Town Clerk, would you please take a roll call? If you are in favor of moving this forward to February 24th with 4 of the 5, please indicate by saying aye. If not, a nay.
Councilman Gutenberg,
Aye.
Councilman McCormick,
Aye.
Councilman Sampson,
Aye.
Councilman Johnson,
Yes.
Mayor James.
Nay.
The motion passes.
Thank you very much. And that brings, and it's not that I disagree. I've clearly stated the reasons why I think that we should have done it completely. So it does need to be done, and we'll get it with a public hearing now. Fund balance reserve policy.
All right,
Mr.
good evening.
Stevens.
Yeah, Chuck Stevens, your town manager. This is a conversation about the fund balance reserve policy and what you have, the draft policy in your packet this evening. So by way of background, council, sound fiscal management requires the establishment and maintenance of adequate fund balance reserves to protect the town from economic uncertainties, revenue shortfalls, and emergency situations. Currently, the town does not have a formal comprehensive fund balance reserve policy that defines reserve categories, establishes target levels, or provides guidelines for the use and replenishment of reserves. This fund balance reserve policy was developed in accordance with Governmental Accounting Standards Board Statement Number 54 and the Government Finance Officers Association's best practices. The policy establishes 6 distinct reserve funds within the general fund, each with specific purposes, target levels, and usage guidelines. And you have those detailed for you in your packet, those 6 funds. The policy has been reviewed by the Finance Committee and aligns with the town's strategic plan goal number 1, which is good governance, specifically the objective to manage all assets as a responsible fiduciary. The fiscal impact of this policy would establish reserve fund targets, but does not immediately require new appropriations. The policy formalizes existing reserve practices and provides a framework for building reserves over time through year-end fund balance allocations. The policy enhances the town's long-term fiscal sustainability by protecting against revenue volatility in emergency situations, maintaining adequate cash flow for operations, supporting the town's credit rating and borrowing capacity, providing transparency and fund balance reporting, enabling strategic use of one-time funds for capital needs. The town manager and the town treasurer will prepare an annual report on reserve fund status during the budget development process and make recommendations for achieving target levels over a multi-year period if necessary. And then also in your packet, we detail further strategic plan alignment, your sustainability considerations, and your ADA considerations. Your recommended action this evening is that you adopt Resolution 26-06, the Fund Balance Reserve Policy, approving the Fund Balance Reserve Policy effective July 1st, 2026 as presented.
Thank you very much. And thank you for that thorough report and explaining the importance of the fund balance. That was very clear. Do I have any comments?
Yes, yeah. So really just some questions, I think, for town staff. I think I'm very encouraged to see this as something that came up during our initial contact with the first budget that we didn't participate in the whole cycle of, unfortunately, right? And so this immediately became obvious to me there, and so staff preparing this is excellent. I'm very much in favor of it. Here's what I'd like to kind of poke at a little bit and get a better understanding for how we're going to apply this as a group as we get into the budget. Really, it's kind of in three areas. The first two are kind of the same thing, but it's really around capital investments, right? And so as I sat down with this, I really looked at this in context of the FY26 budget and just looked at, okay, how would this actually lay out with the numbers we have, right? And so I think it's very well articulated and based in practices that are sound, right? Like that's all very clear from the staff report and the way it was laid out and what the finance committee has done. Where it starts to get a little more squishy to me, and I'd like to really understand is in for example, the IT reserve, right? So in that area, we're using the operations budget for IT as the basis. What is missing from it, in my view, is the cost of recapitalization of the IT infrastructure that we have. And then so when I looked at the total that IT budget for operations, that comes out to about the cost of the server failure we had last year, right? So that makes me go, the 20% is definitely too low. And the reason it's too low is because I know we don't have the rest of the assets there. And I think that, you know, what I'd like to hear from town staff is like how we navigate that and how you see us kind of rounding that out and what options we have
Absolutely.
to plus that up in the policy.
Yeah, and happy to try and address that for you, Counselor. And before I do that, though, I am going to invite Karina Larson, our town treasurer, to come up so that she can weigh in as appropriate. With regard to the IT budget, so yes, this reserve policy as applied to the 26 budget is going to fall short. Absolutely. So with the 2027 budget, as we are already underway now, meeting with department heads, as you know, we did hire an IT person for the town. So we actually have someone in the seat now, and that's a systems administrator. You know, Michelle and I met with Stephen last week, and we started building the IT budget, a real IT budget, meaning not that we didn't have an IT budget before, but we haven't addressed the comprehensive information technology needs of the organization, nor has the town planned for a life cycle refresh of assets or the infrastructure that's required to maintain the network, those kinds of things over the past few years. So we've met with Stephen. We've also met with our managed service provider, DataPrize. And we're building a very, very different looking budget for council to consider in 2027. It's going to be a big number versus the 26 budget, which is a very small number. Okay. I don't know rough order of magnitude what that number is going to be, probably 6 digits. Okay. So I think it'll be more realistic in the 27 budget when you see, because what we're trying to do is, you know, it starts with the inventory of the assets we have, the end user assets, the endpoint devices. And normally what I want to bring the organization to is where we're on a life cycle tech refresh of every asset every 4 years. But because it hasn't been done, I'm a little, I think doing 25% in 2027 of, a quarter of our assets would
Mhm.
fall short.
Yeah.
And so we're going to try, and the numbers will tell the story. You've heard me say that already, right? I mean, a million times, but the numbers will drive this number. But I've asked Stephen to start working numbers at a 40 to 50% refresh rate for 27, because I want to baseline the organization, and then we can roll into a very programmatic, once every 4 years, something's getting updated, and that's a very predictable number that will increase over time with inflation and things like that. When we get to that point, I think this 20%, I think council will look at me and go, that's way too much. Okay. For this year, I think 20% is probably fair. And I think I would just ask, as it relates to IT, let's wait and see what the numbers are in 2027, because I think we're going to hit the mark.
Thank you. That makes perfect sense to me, describing it that way. So I appreciate that. And I assume it's probably a similar answer for the other element. So if we move into into the vehicle reserve, right, in the capital plan, and the capital plan is huge. It's got a lot more than that, but I picked vehicles because it's kind of tangible and it's come up a few times, right? And so the first thing that sort of cued me in to look at this is, like, when you look at the budget, there's reference in there that the town has a 75 vehicle fleet. When I look at the 5-year capital improvement plan, I see plans for 26 vehicles in there to be replaced, right? So what that tells me is like there's probably some things that are missing there. And so to what you just said with the ITT, right, with the vehicle plan, I would expect that the next budget would have all of it there. And I think the great thing about that for us operating in looking at the budget is if we have a budget for the entire vehicle fleet, and staff comes to us and says, as a council, and says, we're replacing 3 vehicles and they're in the reserve fund budget vehicle plan, then that's a consent agenda. It's pretty easy to move through that. If you're telling me you're adding to the fleet, then I want to have a conversation like, what does that do to the reserves? Why is the need? And then we can manage that to that. Is that okay? So
Would you like me to respond?
yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Council, you're absolutely correct. I don't know how far we're going to get with vehicles in the 27 budget, but we need to do the same exact thing. Now, you all know I have an IT background, so it was easy for me to walk in and go, okay, we're going to address IT in this budget. My first budget, we're going to address IT. We need to do the same exact thing with the vehicles. And vehicles are going to be a little bit different, because I assume that within our vehicle fleet, it also includes heavy equipment, right? And so the life expectancy of a backhoe is very, very different as compared to the life expectancy of a patrol vehicle, right? So it's going to be a little bit different. That's going to be far more nuanced and is going to require a lot more analysis for staff. So are we going to have that level of fidelity and granularity in the 27 budget? I doubt it. I think we're going to probably continue in 27 to do what we have been and try to improve in future years. That's going to be my.
Yeah. And my assumption is, right, where we lack specificity and things like that, because of how much time it takes to get there, we can make assumptions and build a number around some reasonable, well-informed assumptions. So, and then just the final question really on this for me is that, and in a lot of ways, it's the most important, right? Like the overarching driving concern for me with establishing reserve fund policies is that, because we do maintain a high level of reserve, unassigned reserve, that the town is not incentivized or not disciplined to make sure that we have enough set aside for our infrastructure that delivers enterprise services. So the policy is specific to the general fund. And so I want to make sure I'm understanding the interplay there, or if we have a gap in policy there. It's so important that we had public comment tonight about exactly these issues, right? Like making sure that we are investing in infrastructure. This is something, it's related to, it just runs through everything we do. And it's just so, I think it's really important that we have this conversation now so we all understand how we're wiring this part together.
Okay. I did invite Corinne up, and so I don't want her to leave without having an opportunity to speak. So, Ms. Larson, could you please address that question?
So we are starting just with a general fund now, but the one comment I did want to make is that we do have the major facility reserve, which is to help with capacity and upgrades. So that's for water and sewer, which is our largest capital expense funds. So we do have something there. But yes, we do need to establish a reserve fund for each of the enterprise. But we're starting with the general fund and see how that works and what we need to tweak and make sure that we get this right as we move into the other funds.
Okay. And that makes sense to me. And I think when staff talked to us about at our last meeting about our budget preferences, and we talked about services being self-funding, and that we acknowledged, I think, as a group, that there are things where we're going to have to cross lines and move money from general fund into reserve fund. And I think what you just described is sort of probably that dynamic a little bit, right?
And the other thing I want to point out, staff has been working on a comprehensive worksheet that identifies the age of vehicle, how much is used, what the life expectancy based on the vehicle. So we have a worksheet that we're working on for that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. That's all I have.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Councilman Gutenberg. Ms. Stevens, I sent you a couple questions beforehand. You've already answered those, so thank you. If anybody wants those specific questions, feel free to reach out directly to me and I can share those. I do have a couple of comments though. So first is thank you, Ms. Larson. Thank you, Mr. Stevens, and everybody else that worked on this. This is a policy, so it's something that is actually set in a left and right limit for this council, and I would argue future councils as well. So it's proactive in nature, which is something that this council has talked about numerous times. Why, frankly, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but to get proactive in ensuring that we're setting up La Plata for the future. This is a really good way for us. And Councilman Gutenberg used this great example. Like right now, if we wanted to, this council could get together and vote for a Ferris wheel. Do we have any sort of protective measure to ensure that we're actually spending that money responsibly? And I think this is a really good way to set that foundation, to scaffold off that with some other policies that we've been pursuing. And I'm very, very happy with this document right now. And I look forward to the future ones with the rest of our reserves. So thank you.
Yes, I just had 2 or 3 questions. Treasurer Larson, can you just explain to me so it's clear, because I had a hard time trying to really clarify my mind, the difference between the contingency fund and the emergency fund? What specifically the two would do?
So the contingency fund is for like unexpected events that we could have planned for, but we didn't, weren't sure. Where emergency fund, we didn't expect for it at all, like or the tornado. Let's put that as an example. That way you have an ability to go to the emergency fund and the contingency fund. And that's why I wanted to keep those two things separately. I want to try to cover all bases.
Yeah, I can give maybe a more concrete example of that. So you'll typically see a contingency with your capital items. And anybody that's done any kind of capital project in the last 5 years, we may enter into a contract agreement, and we typically don't do not to exceed prices here in the town. So we could get into a project, let's say it's a paving project, and then that bill could come in a little bit higher than what we expected. That's not an emergency. But if we had a 10% contingency within the capital budget, we would use contingency. Emergency is exactly like what the treasurer described. That's the tornado. Nobody could foresee it. That's an emergency fund.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies that for me. And then something else I noticed, sticking with the contingency fund, and it may be in there and I just didn't see it. So if it is, just let me know. But I noticed when I was reading through the document, it seemed like the document emphasized that to pull money out of the contingency fund, it will go to council. I did not see, not saying it's not in there, but I didn't see the same thing for the other funds. So I just wanted to be clear in my mind that everything coming out of every fund has to come to council first. Is that the way it's set up?
It's been my practice to bring everything in front of this council in a public meeting. I mean, we try to be transparent, but if we're going to do a budget amendment to move funds from any of the reserves that are identified in this policy, it's our practice to bring it in front of this council, just if for no other reason than to have the public conversation about it and to build the public record.
Okay, and this is my last question, and it piggybacks on that one. How does the rule, and it may be obvious, but I'm just trying to get it clarified in my mind. So we have that rule in place. If it's less than $20,000, an action can be taken. But if it's coming out of the reserve fund, is that the same, or is it because it's coming out of that particular fund with this policy, it comes before the council?
Yes, sir, I understand. So you're talking about our procurement policy,
Yeah.
which has the spend threshold, and if it's less than $20,000, I don't need to bring the contract in front of council. I'm sorry, regardless of that, if we're going to move money out of any of these funds, we're going to bring that in front of council.
Okay, that's all the questions I have.
Councilman Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor James. Thank you, staff, for the report and for the excellent conversation, Star Gutenberg. I just have two questions. Let's start with unassigned funds first. I see that it says every 4 years we will relook at the policy to make sure that's the right amount, but every year it said something about coming before council for and pardon me, I just lost my thought. To look at how to use those funds and others unassigned. So, or increase committed fund balances as deemed necessary to reach target levels. Do we see that on a yearly basis, or we want to stick to the 4 years when we look at that spending?
No. We would look at that yearly basis.
Okay.
Yes.
And the 4-year review is just to make sure you have the appropriate funding. And
Yeah, and make sure that this is appropriate for continued operations. Yeah.
Understandable. And my last question, back to vehicles real quick. And I know there was some conversation about this in May. When we repurpose a vehicle, instead of bidding it out to public auction, that vehicle remains in the fleet. And there's still expense.
So if, say that the police are retiring a vehicle, but it has some use in another department, we would then repurpose, use that vehicle, transfer that vehicle to the other department, and the police would then get a replacement of a vehicle. And once that vehicle reaches the limits of its life and the town has no more use for it, then it will be surplused.
Okay, so are you all, I know y'all working that worksheet now, are you all defining what the life limit is of a vehicle, or is it just based on mechanical cost?
So there's a combination of things. I have the life of the vehicle, the type of vehicle, and the anticipated life of the vehicle, the number of years, how old the vehicle is, the current mileage of the vehicle, what's the purpose of the vehicle, who's the vehicle's assigned to. And in that worksheet, we have also, is the vehicle going to be repurposed for public works? Or is it going to be surplused? And most of the vehicles for the police get repurposed, and then most of the vehicles in other departments get surplused.
Okay, so there's a formula to how you make that decision. My further question is,
Can I just reiterate on one other thing? This is something that finance put together that the departments need to actually evaluate based on what we've identified, based on age, years, and what they've said the useful life of the vehicle is.
okay. Okay, I get to my question in terms of, so if we repurpose a vehicle, but let's just say, and I might be way off, Chuck, and just tell me, Public Works budget for 6 vehicles this year and the police department budget for 4, but if we repurpose a vehicle, that continues to add to the fleet. How, like, when you repurpose it, did that take one of your vehicles off the capital list for the upcoming year, or what's your thoughts?
No, let me try. So, Counselor, you are at pro level now with your budget and your dilemmas. Because what you're talking about, these roll down vehicles, I love them and I hate them. All right. What needs to happen is if we're going to roll down a vehicle, the department that's going to receive that vehicle, they need to budget for it because there are operating expenses that are going to come with that. You can't, there's no such thing as a free lunch. There's no such thing as a free vehicle. Even if we're not having to go out and pay money for a new vehicle, the receiving department has got to put that into their budget. If they come to me mid-budget and say, and this is usually how it goes, right? Oh, I see that the police department is getting rid of a vehicle. I could sure use that vehicle. You know, let us have that vehicle at whatever department. If it's not in the budget, and I hope all the department heads are hearing me right now, if it's not in the budget, you're not getting that vehicle because we need to plan and we need to be able to account for the additional operating expenses that come with that vehicle. Now, if you tell me during the budget that you need a new vehicle and during that budget cycle, I know I have an asset that we're going to retire, I can roll it down to you. Bob's your uncle. We'll do that all day long. Okay. But we've got a plan. Remember, the budget is a plan and we've got to plan ahead.
I appreciate the explanation. And I recognize this is a great start point to where how the conversation started back in May to make sure that we identify how we're operating. But that was my only question. I appreciate the work and the answers.
All right. Thank you very much. So we're looking for a consensus to move this forward to legislation. If you are in favor, please indicate by saying aye. If not, please say nay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. It will be seen again in just a bit. Thank you very much. And now we go to our matters of information about our adequate public facilities ordinance.
All right. Council, again, I'm Chuck Stevens. I'm your town manager, and third time's a charm. We're going to talk about the APFO and all that entails. So tonight, this is a continuation of our conversation about the zoning text amendment 01-2026 that actually came before the Planning Commission 1 week ago today on January 6th. And these changes propose comprehensive updates to the town's growth management tools. The reason why we're talking about this here this evening, this agenda item serves several multiple important purposes. So first of all, public awareness. We want to ensure that our community understands how these regulations will affect the town of La Plata's future. We want to have this conversation in a public meeting, put this information in the public domain because we welcome comments like we had tonight that whether it was intentional or not, speaks directly to this issue, and that's why we put it out here. That's why it's here for a matter of information, even though we're not asking for anything formal from council, no formal action for you this evening. We wanted this conversation in the public domain so that we can build this narrative with our community and engage with our residents on the topic. We are going to be looking for your thoughts and direction to take back to the Planning Commission. Oh, I'm sorry. Don, will you please join us up at the table? I'll ask our Director of Planning, Don Dooley, to join us here this evening as well. So he'll be available to answer questions when we get to that point as well. But we want to take your thoughts and bring them back to the Planning Commission. Planning Commission is going to hear this topic again on their February 3rd meeting. So we want to hear your thoughts and directions so that we can provide that to them as they continue their conversation. Of course, we want to build the formal record. You've heard, I've been here for 6 months. You've heard me say a million times, we want to build the public record. We're doing that here tonight. Tonight is another example. It's another opportunity to hear directly from our residents. And I'm glad to see that somebody took advantage of that this evening. But another reason why we wanted this on your agenda tonight is just to get that public input. And finally, to build trust. I mean, during the public comment tonight, we heard some things that I think probably stung. I mean, you hate hearing things like, oh, the government lied to me or something like that. That's horrible. We don't want that. So we're trying to build trust. You do that through transparent, deliberative process. And that's what we're demonstrating here this evening by having this conversation in this forum. So what we're actually talking about are two distinct items within the code. One of those changes falls within the zoning code, and then the other falls in a separate section of the code. So we're talking about Chapter 191, which is in the zoning code, and then Chapter 173, which addresses the school seat allocation policy. Collectively, we've been referring to these changes as the APFO. Okay, so there is not a single document that you can put your hands on and say, this is the town's APFO. These are actually changes that are going to take place in different parts of our code. But when you bring them all together, we're going to address water, sewer, transportation, and school seat allocation, all with the same purpose of ensuring that there's infrastructure to support development as we grow. That is the purpose of the APFO. So I just want to be clear on that distinction. You're going to hear me say APFO. You're going to hear it a million times between now and when we adopt whatever we end up adopting. But just to be clear, it's actually Chapter 191 and 173, multiple changes in each of those places. Within Chapter 191, the zoning chapter, we're actually proposing to add a new article, Article 10, that establishes comprehensive adequate public facilities requirements for the water, the sewer, and the roads. And then in 173, that's the school seat allocation policy. And these aren't just technical code updates, which is what you would normally see when we bring a zoning change in front of you after it goes through the Planning Commission. This is a fundamental shift in how the town of La Plata plans to manage growth, moving from more reactive approvals to proactive infrastructure planning. And so I want to be really clear on what we're proposing here, because this is not simply good planning practice. It goes beyond that. This is absolutely a prerequisite for solving our most pressing infrastructure challenge, and that is the water allocation in our permit. You all remember the September 9th presentation that we gave in here, and we talked about our permit, our allocations, how we're creeping up near the allocations, and how we need to act now to ensure that the town is operating within its permits, and council is doing exactly that. And this conversation is a continuation of that that was started on September 9th. But just to recap, the water capacity situation, both Charles County and the Maryland Department of the Environment have made clear that they are desirous of the town having an ability to demonstrate responsible growth management before they'll talk to us in a meaningful way about increasing the permit allocations. And then we've also been informed by the county that the county wants the town to have an APFO before they will talk to us about a supplemental water agreement. So I think what I said to the Planning Commission last week was we're in this, it's a chicken and an egg, it's a circular logic conversation. We need the supplemental water agreement, but we can't get that until we get the APFO, and we need the APFO to have the conversation about the supplemental water agreement. So it doesn't matter where we're jumping in the circle, we're in it, and we're having that conversation now, and we're excited about this opportunity. So let me talk specifically about some of the changes in the draft language that's in front of you in your packets. So, and I tried to frame these based on some of the questions that came out of the Planning Commission. And I know that all of you, and I should have started by thanking all of you, because I know that all of you either attended in person or watched the video of the Planning Commission meeting. And that really helps this conversation today. And I appreciate you exercising that due diligence to watch that meeting. It was my characterization is it was a very productive, great opening to this conversation with our community. And I know I'm going to go back and watch it. I think it was about an hour and a half, maybe. I think it's 90 minutes well spent to remind ourselves as we go through this conversation. But I did try to highlight some of the bigger topics that were talked about last Tuesday and address them here as I gave you this report. So first of all, there was quite a bit of conversation about the 80% rule with water and sewer, and in your proposed language, it's proposed that the town cannot approve development that would cause our water or wastewater systems to exceed 80% of the permitted capacity without adequate mitigation. And so the question that came back to staff was, well, why 80%? I think all of you know that I was in a meeting today with MDE and some of their attorneys, and we actually talked about this. I said, hey, why you're here, right? Because the answer I gave the Planning Commission was the state has this 80% threshold. And when you are edging up on that 80% threshold and you break it for either water or wastewater, you owe the state the capacity management plan for either water or wastewater. And that's the primary driver behind this, because anytime we can have a nexus between what we're doing and align it with what the state's requirements are, I think it's just better for everybody. So that's the very short answer of why we landed on 80%. So MDE, as I said, requires municipalities to develop that capacity management plan at 80%. The 20% buffer, it accounts for peak loading, emergency reserves, and seasonal variations. And you saw that in your September 9th report, how over the seasons, the water demands can fluctuate. More importantly, though, it provides time to plan and construct expansions before you reach a crisis point. Okay, it gives us time to react. When you're talking about building a water treatment plant or a wastewater treatment plant or modifications to one of those things, they're very expensive and they take a very long time to get done. So you want that time to be able to build that out so that when the demand comes online, the infrastructure is there to support it. And then, of course, as I said last week, industry best practice recognizes that infrastructure should not routinely operate at 100% capacity, or as I like to say, you don't want to run a race car in the red, right? You don't want to do that. So we want to plan ahead. To use an analogy that I think everybody's familiar with, your gas tank and your dashboard in your car, when that yellow light goes off on your fuel gauge, it's not saying you're out of gas. It's saying you better go find a gas station. Okay, because you're probably at about 20% remaining. Same thing here. So that's where we got the 80%. We tied it to the state, and we think it is the right threshold to make sure that we have plans for future infrastructure expansion. And that's why potentially we could have to say no to development if we are already exceeding 80% capacity for either of these two topics, these water or sewer. There was a lot of conversation about roads and level of service and the level of service of C. And so just to baseline everyone, when you're talking about roads, and we're not talking about grading the roads like there's potholes or things like that, or they need to be painted. When we're talking levels of service on roads in practical terms, we're talking about how traffic flows across a road. So levels A and B typically represent free flowing traffic. Traffic's moving, you're getting from point A to point B, and you're not having or experiencing a lot of delays. Level of service C represents stable flow with some moderate delays. This is what we're proposing for the town of La Plata. Levels of service D and E represent progressively worse congestion. And then of course, level of service F represents failure of the transportation system, which looks like gridlock. That's when you're in gridlock and you're out on the roads. That's an F, and we don't want to get there. So the language that you have in the draft in your packets, we're proposing level of service C. And if a development comes in and the impacts of that development are going to degrade the town road from level of service C, below level of service C, we would ask them to mitigate that and bring it up to level C before it would be considered favorably. The schools, there was a lot of significant changes to the language that already exists in our code around the schools. There are some fundamental changes. So probably the biggest is the elimination of the 100-seat minimum guarantee. The current code guarantees a minimum of 100 school seat allocations annually, regardless of the actual capacity of the schools. The proposed amendments eliminate this guarantee and tie allocations directly to available capacity in the specific schools that town of La Plata residents will attend. Okay, and we think that was a very important distinction. We're also proposing that we adopt the county's student yield factors. So rather than conducting town-specific surveys to establish the particularized student generation rates, we would use the standardized student yield factors already published by Charles County, already produced by Charles County Public Schools. This ensures consistency and eliminates disputes over the methodology. There were some questions about the 6% proportional cap. To ensure the town of La Plata doesn't consume a disproportionate share of countywide school capacity, allocations would be capped at 6% of total county excess capacity, which is roughly proportional to our share of the county's growth area population. We represent approximately 6% of the county's population. That's where that number came from. And I know you all watched. We had a good conversation on that last week. So really, we're trying to focus on the town, our residents, and those schools that our students will attend within what I refer to as the feeder schools. And that's probably not a good term, and I should probably find a better term, but that's the one that I've been using. So rather than looking at the countywide capacity, we will we will calculate allocations based only on the elementary, middle, and high schools that actually serve the town of La Plata students. We believe that it's more realistic and prevents us from claiming capacity that doesn't actually benefit our residents. So the Planning Commission held its first public hearing 1 week ago today on January 6th. And at staff's request, they kept the public record open specifically to gather more input. And we did that on purpose. Because of the timing of the release of the documents, it was just before the holidays. And the last thing that I don't want any of you or the town to be accused of trying to bury something in the holidays. So that's why the staff recommendation, from the very beginning was keep this public hearing open. And you even heard in the public comments that night, like, oh my goodness, you dropped this right before the holidays, and now here we are. It's like, okay, it's okay, everyone. Like, we're not trying to get this, we're not trying to pull a fast one here. We want to keep this open. So we did hear some things in that public comment. There were concerns about grandfathering. So there were comments expressed about projects that are already in the approval pipeline. And the development community wants clear transition provisions to ensure that projects that have already invested significant time and money aren't suddenly subject to new restrictions that didn't exist when they started, or please don't move the goalpost on us, right? That's what they're really saying, okay? And I think, I don't believe that it's the town's intention to do that. If you are already in the pipeline, you're in the pipeline. And typically, these types of changes, especially when you're talking about planning projects and development, if we're going to make a change, there's an effective date that's established at a point in time in the future, and then things that are in the pipeline. And in my experience, and I would work with Don on this, but in my experience, if you have a complete application in the pipeline, then you're usually subject to the rules that were in place when your application was deemed complete. Okay. If you come in the day after this is adopted and you give us an application and it's not complete, and by the time the application is complete, the effective date has come and gone, well, now you're subject to the new rules. Okay. That's typically what we see, and staff will have to give you what we think are the right terms for that. Predictability. Developers requested a transparent, publicly available accounting system showing how much water, sewer, road, and school capacity existed at any given time, because they want to know the rules of the game before they invest money in design and engineering, and that's absolutely fair. We agree with that. We think that any developer should be able to come in, any landowner, anybody that has a vision for property that they own should be able to come in, talk with our planning department, and, have a feasibility conversation. And we should be able to tell them, what is doable, what is realistic, even before they spend any money on very complex detailed engineering plans or design or architecture design or any of that, to just look and say, yeah, there's going to be capacity for that. We can see what you're proposing here. We think you're going to be in the ballpark. We don't have to worry about it. So I don't think that was an unreasonable request, and staff will absolutely work to make sure that we hit that target. The Planning Commission talked about a number of things, but several key points. Process. So the commission deliberately kept the public hearing open to at least February 3rd, because I think that they demonstrated they want to ensure the ordinance is thoroughly vetted, legally defensible, and workable in practice before they adopt it. So staff is happy to accommodate that. There was a lot of conversation about traffic engineering and also the school enrollment projection methodologies, because they can be very complex and very technical. When I met with Charles County Public Schools, they offered to come attend either Planning Commission or with the town council, because the school seat methodology and how schools get built in Maryland and in Charles County is incredibly complex, and it is a field of expertise that I don't claim to have. And so when we get to that point in the conversation, I will gladly invite them to be here so that the council can get very comfortable in drilling down into how they make those calculations that we're recommending that you adopt, those student yield factors. Transparency. Commission was agreeable to the concept of public capacity scorecard. I believe it was Councilor Gutenberg that actually brought this up, like some kind of report card. And this tied back to what the developers were wanting. We just want to know what's available, water, sewer capacity, before we come in. I think the town owes our development community that. I don't think that you're going to get any resistance from staff. We need to build that, though. I do envision a future where at some point in time, the town is on autopilot and is acting in a proactive manner in such a way that we already know our infrastructure limitations and our capacity limits, and we're planning those in our capital improvement, so that developers shouldn't ever have to worry about, is the capacity there or does it exist, because we're doing our job. Staff is doing our jobs, building that capital improvement plan, making sure that we're one step ahead. Development doesn't happen overnight. Pine Grove doesn't happen overnight. These other big developments don't happen overnight. They take years to build. That gives us plenty of time to make sure that we're building out the infrastructure at a commensurate rate, so that when the next project comes in, they don't have to worry about it. It really goes to being proactive and not reactive. And I think that the language that we're offering you here today is the first step in getting there. It doesn't get us all the way there. I'll be the first to admit that this probably isn't the total solution, but it is a first step. So what's happening next? The Planning Commission is going to hold its continued public hearing on February 3rd of 2026. What we hear tonight and what we hear between now and the 3rd, and when I say we, the staff, we're already hearing comments from the public. Tomorrow, I was invited to speak to the MBIA, the Maryland Building Industry Association. I will bet dollars to donuts they're going to ask me about tonight. They're going to ask me about APFO. Happy to talk about it. Also happy to solicit their feedback and their input. You know, we can go out and pay to get professional expertise on some of these things, or we can get it for free. And so between now and February 3rd, I plan to reach out to the development community. It starts tomorrow, but also our land use agents and our land use attorneys, and sit down with them and say, hey, if you have comments, if you have recommendations or suggestions, we welcome them and we invite them. Okay. I would rather have them give them to me for free and not bill me, you know, $200 an hour or whatever they charge. Give me that free legal advice. I'll take it. But here's what I'll tell everyone, and I want council to know this, and this is something that I learned in a previous role. Okay. We are happy to sit down with you and hear and take all of your input and all of your comments. Every single comment will absolutely be considered. Absolutely. Not every single comment will ultimately be adopted. Okay. And there's a big distinction there. Okay. Because what may happen is when the day comes that you are considering language for the final time, you may have public comment come up here and someone's going to say, well, I gave comment and nobody listened to me. Okay. And I'm going to tell you right now, that's not true. We're going to listen and we're going to consider it, but it doesn't mean that everybody's going to get every single thing that you ask for. That's not how it works. Okay. Everybody's going to have to make a compromise. Staff will do our very, very best to highlight those friction points and highlight those compromises as we go. Okay. But I'm going to do that between now and February 3rd so that when we come back in front of the Planning Commission, we can give them as much information that we're hearing from the public as possible. At that hearing, the Planning Commission, they may be ready to make a formal recommendation, or they may want to keep that hearing open and go into March. They may, I don't know. It really depends on the conversations that they have that night. But there is a possibility that they could make a formal recommendation back to this council. If so, council will then hold its own public hearing on that timeline. That would likely be in March or April, where you would consider adoption of the ordinance language. And again, those are two different sections, 191 and 173. So your recommendation tonight is a little squishy. It's a little unusual for you. It's just staff is going to recommend that we take the time to get this right. Okay. I know that there's a sense of urgency to this. I know that it's very, very important, but I also know that process matters. And especially when you're talking about land use, I think that no matter what language finally gets adopted, that if we can sit down with the stakeholders who actively played a role in it, and they can look me in the eye and say, you know, Chuck, I didn't get everything I wanted, but we respect the process. Okay. That is a huge win for this town, this organization, this council. All right. That's what we're striving for, because we're going to get the ordinance language. We're going to get there, but we need to build that trust, and we need to make sure that our residents and our development community have faith in the process. I think that's all that I have for you. Don and I are now ready to answer any questions that you may have.
Well, thank you very much. And first, I have to say some kudos to my fellow councilman. Councilman Gutenberg, you did a stellar job running that meeting and public hearing, and you had some very poignant questions that really many of us had pondered but did not articulate like you did. And so thank you for that. You really had a very good meeting and set the tone for the future on that. So, and thank you for holding the meeting opened. You're right. No one wants the Christmas surprise, you know, a couple days before, but the process has to get started. So it got their attention. And I just want to do a little bit of editorial comments here. One of the things that with the town of La Plata, we were small And in the late 80s, Pine Grove, which was Heritage Green at the time, was sold. And we never thought that that would come to fruition. And so although they were planning ahead, there wasn't a need for an APFO back then. And the perfect storm happened. Not only did someone that had the funding to be able to purchase that large swath of land and build on it came in, at that same time, our water allocation was in danger. And full disclosure, Pine Grove knew, DR Horton knew about this prior to them purchasing it. So I think that's a very important piece of information for that. But, and we have been working with MDE since 2018. So all of this, government is slow. That is for sure. But I really appreciate all the time and effort that you have put in there, especially addressing the school seats, because that has always just baffled me, that language in there. I understood it, but I didn't really get it on that one. So thank you for that. I look forward to seeing the progress done correctly and not rushed. I will, any comments I have, I will send to you all, and that way you can digest them instead of putting you on the spot right here. All right, Councilman Gutenberg.
Thank you so much, and thank you for those comments. I'll share with the group. I reached out to the mayor after the after that meeting and expressed to her that I have a newfound appreciation for the skill at which she administers these meetings, because that is something to run a public meeting, and something of that importance. I felt the weight of it doing that meeting, but now I have a little bit of a taste for it. I kind of liked it, I have to say. But if I could, just a couple things I wanted to say. We built a pretty significant piece of the record last week that I think we're all pretty proud of that, because it was very much needed. But I want to say some things about kind of the vision of where we're headed with this, because I think it's important context for the council. And I just have a couple of quick things for I promise, for comments for staff that are related, but more in the context of what the council needs to consider with you all than the planning commission context. So, you talked about the process, Mr. Stevens, and the process here is important. I think, and also like the comments that you made, Madam Mayor, about how we got here, I think are really important to this, because this has been a very long story, right? And when this council was elected, I was very pleased that you all nominated me and placed me on the planning commission. And I will say that the current iteration of the process started on June 3rd, right? Our first meeting with the Planning Commission. And I asked there for an agenda to talk about and prioritize with the Planning Commission, the APFO. And we're going to do some training next week, or no, Thursday night with our boards and commissions. And I think, the context of us using the Planning Commission to deep dive this has helped us get where we are. It's one of the components, right? And so June 3rd, we had that discussion that we needed a working session. Staff heard us. July 22nd, Mr. Dooley led us in a working session on the Planning Commission where we discussed APFO, issues around it, the concept of how we would proceed. Then on the 9th of September, the town staff led by Mr. Stevens presented like really outstanding context compared to what we've had in the past, right? Of kind of like where we were in the allocation space with regard to sewage, a treatment plant, and the water, which is really needed context for what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing. Then on October 7th, we did a session as well in the Planning Commission for where we discussed with DR Horton all issues around one of the most significant projects being undertaken in the town right now. That is great context in that meeting as well for all of the things that we're considering here. And that culminated then in staff. It's not lost on me. It's amazing when I think I have to really just say this to you both, Mr. Stevens and Mr. Dooley. You mentioned it in our meeting, but the size of our planning department in the town of La Plata, you can count the number of staff on one hand and have fingers left over to still dial the phone. When I have been in sessions hosted by the state planning department where Mr. Grolsch, who's the director of planning for the county, spoke, he mentioned the size of his staff. He has more staff in the County Planning Commission than the town has staff on in the entire town. Okay. So the fact that the town staff was able to like listen to what council was saying, figure a way to prioritize it and do it with the staff that you had on hand is I said it was commendable that night, but it's just worth mentioning again that you know, with focus, right, and the council focused us, you know, as well, right, like that's another thing that's very much appreciated, I think, here is that the council was clear in its direction and this was made a top priority. Staff reacted to it, and so, you know, I'm proud of where we are. We're not ready to ring the bell yet that we've, you know, accomplished our goals, but boy, it feels good that we're making progress here, even though things do move slow, right? But there is speed and deliberateness in what we're doing here, and I think that's good. So I'll leave those comments there, and then so the couple of things I just wanted to bring up as well that are context for this commission or this council to consider is that, you know, you made some comments, and Mr. Stevens, about you know, having a scorecard and things like that for developers so they understand where we are. And I mentioned this a little bit, but I want to reemphasize it here, especially in light of some of the comments we heard tonight in opening or in public comment, right? Like, we have a responsibility also to make available the context of what we're doing to the public, right? And so that's why one of the things that I kept stressing in comments last week is that we really have a responsibility to do the reporting in a way where it's very clear, not just to developers, but to the public conversation. And the reason why this is so important to me is that when we have conversations about annexations or master site development plans in the future, I want us to be better about being able to communicate and people being able to validate what we're saying. A frustration that I have had both before being in office and even in office. And I've expressed this to folks during planning commission meetings where I'm trying to trace back things like the evaluation of whether or not we are revenue negative or revenue positive on a development. While we are attesting to that in documentation as a town, as an organization, it's hard to validate those numbers. And so when the public has the experience that they're having with traffic and with what we're having with water allocations, the question is fair to be asked. Why are we where we are today, right? And so when I stress the reporting, it is important. We don't want to have frustrating interactions with folks that are coming through to request how they're proposing development, right? We don't want that. We experience it on the planning commission where we've had things come back and back and back, and that we don't desire that, right? We don't desire anyone to have a bad experience in interacting with local government for the things that we have to do. But also, we don't want our residents to not understand or not be able to trace back to if this is a benefit, then where are we with evaluating that, and do people understand the linkage to those things? And then the other piece that's critically important, we talked about it tonight with reserve funds. We have not, when we in the past we were approving things with the foresight of bringing infrastructure along appropriately to what we're approving, right? This is what the vision really, I think, of this APFO for me is that we're able to make sure we are holding ourselves accountable to the commitments of past councils, which is appropriate. That's what we have to do. We are not just five people here in one space in time, right? We are responsible for all council's decisions. As future councils who are elected in here will have to honor and manage through the commitments that we make while we're here. And so I hope that what we're achieving, and one of my goals for us is that we implement zoning changes and code changes that we're calling the APFO that set us up so that this council, future councils, when people are looking at the decisions we made, they can see a tie to the budgets and the investments that were made to honor the commitments that were made, and that we're keeping pace with what we need to do. So we're not asking people to sacrifice more for what was proposed as a benefit, but it doesn't feel like a benefit, right? The experience. So, and the one last piece I'll say related to this, I'll remind folks of is, there's an obscure thing that we talked about a few months ago. I forget which meeting it was, but there's the study that we asked for that I know is out there and it's being worked at this point for land revenue analysis, right? So that is also a key factor of, I think, and this is probably good for folks to hear what I'm intending us, or what I would envision us using this as. Our comprehensive plan is often held up as, and you can, there's so many good examples of it. You can go back and look on the town website. You can see not only our current comprehensive plan, you can find examples of previous ones from 10 years before that. You can find other engagements that were done for the downtown redevelopment. And when you look at those, you see there is a consistent theme there that people in La Plata want to develop the downtown core. They want to add amenities to the town. They want things that are facilitated by growth. We also have problems, though, with the effects of growth, and we have to manage that better. And so, bringing that study that allows us to objectively analyze certain parts of the comprehensive plan, I think, is critical to us being able to validate that we are actually agreeing to things, and that we're communicating to developers that these are part of the criteria that are the community standards that we'd like to meet. And I do believe that the development community will rise to that challenge, because there are interesting ways we can meet those goals together and achieve the benefits that I think that we all want, right? So I think I'll leave it there, because I do love the sound of my own voice sometimes. I'm sorry, but I think those are just important context for what we're going through here, and I'm looking forward to hearing, as we travel the rest of this path. Thank you.
Thank you for those pithy comments. And Councilman McCormick.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Stevens, I'm going to start with two questions. They're clarifying in nature, and then I'll get into the feedback that you kind of asked for, right? And again, similar to Madam Mayor, and I'm sure the rest of the council, I will also send a written report. What I will say before that, though, is I do, and I can't stress enough, folks, if you get the opportunity, please go through the Planning Commission meeting. January, there's actually a day, or excuse me, December 26th is National Thank You Day. And I participated a little bit late because I sent a personalized message to Councilman Gutenberg, Director Dooley, and Mr. Stevens. I asked you to forward it to everybody on that commission. Excellent, excellent work defining the foundation of what we're doing. Again, cannot say thank you enough for that. Really, really well done. My two questions for you. First question, I've heard this a couple of times. You talk about the chicken and the egg. What came first? Where's the debate at? We have a supplemental water agreement kind of issue with the county, with MDE. They want us to have an APFO, and then this council has been clear that we want an APFO. I will ask this question. It's just to set a foundation, right? Clarifying in nature. If we were to pass these type of pieces to change our code, to change ordinances, et cetera, that does not lock us into a supplemental water agreement immediately. That would require a separate conversation, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, perfect.
Absolutely.
And again, the reason I asked that is, unfortunately, I have heard some feedback from residents that are conflating the two together. I just want to make sure that that is clear. That's how I understand it, and thank you for clarifying that. The second question I have for you is when it gets down to schools, right? So we heard a couple of comments during that actual meeting that Councilman Gutenberg proceeded over with the Planning Commission, and I actually heard a comment today when I was food shopping with my wife, and that was, hey, I see that there's a school portion to this. La Plata doesn't own schools. Can you just sand it down for us real quick? Why do we have a school allegation thing? Why are we looking at that? And I think that will help the residents of La Plata get a better understanding there.
You're right. And I think we make that very, very clear in the staff report
Yes.
that the town doesn't have any influence or jurisdiction over the building of schools at all.
Correct.
Okay. But we have people who live in this town that have school-age children that need to go to school.
Yep.
And those are elementary, middle, and high school. And so it's imperative that we have schools that have available capacity for our students to attend. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yep.
So you can't, the town can't authorize development of, a subdivision of 100 units or 200 units and not let Charles County Public Schools know that this is coming, and let them know in enough advance time that this subdivision is coming and there's some math and some formulas and calculations that we do. Is it a single family residence? Is it a townhome, whatever?
Yep.
And we calculate, approximately how many students will end up living in those homes that are going to impact and stress the school network,
Correct.
the school infrastructure. And so the language that is drafted and is proposed for consideration, all that talks about is the timing and the how and the math and the formula behind how we make those calculations. What numbers are we going to use? We're going to use what we're proposing. We're going to use the Charles County Public Schools numbers because that's what the county uses.
Correct.
And why would we create our own formula? Because that's really confusing.
Yep.
Okay. So we want to get rid of that and we want to standardize it. But it's all just to set the schools up for success because nobody wants to have a school age child that is in an overcapacity school or ends up having to get bused,
Yep.
An hour away or something to get to a school that has capacity. Nobody wants that. So we want to plan like all planning. We want to plan deliberately so that we can be proactive and not reactive and in a crisis mode.
No, and I appreciate that. And again, I really hope that folks take a quick minute to go through those comments and potentially even read them back on the transcript. Because that's 100% correct. And again, we want to be proactive in nature, want to ensure that we're not stressing any type of infrastructure, right? That's why it's called an adequate public facilities ordinance. We want to make sure that we have those adequate facilities, right, ready to go for the public. So let me get into some of the comments. So first thing you stated right off the jump in your report was that this is a fundamental shift in how La Plata plans, right? And you talked about the difference between being reactive in nature to developers' requests and being proactive in nature, ensuring that we have the ability to meet the capacity of the request, to have the infrastructure in place for the request. If we're going to have some sort of traffic impact, et cetera, we're going to know exactly what it is, where that ranks on the scorecard. If it gets us below a certain threshold that we deem, hey, this is a net negative to the town, you are responsible for finding a way to potentially get us back up to that satisfactory score. If this doesn't have an impact to that, to Councilman Gutensberg's point, we can brief that to the public. Hey, this is actually a benefit what this developer and development is doing for the town. And I think that puts us in a great position. So thanks for calling that out. And again, thank you to the staff for putting together a first draft of this that really does highlight that. I think it's very, very important to call that out. You served in the Marine Corps, I served in the Army. We all serve in different places in the private and public sector. But one of the things that's very important when you're going through a fundamental shift like this is defining the problem. Right. And I think that's kind of the first step of any massive, radical, as you said, fundamental shift in how an organization operates. And again, I think this council has definitely shown, and this staff, because of council's direction, has definitely shown the ability to truly define the problem and then come up with left and right limits that solve the intent of what our residents want for the future of La Plata. And again, I cannot stress enough, thank you for doing that here. The final thing, I know Councilman Gutenberg talked about a lot, but it does have to be stressed again, cannot undersell this at all, right? And that is the importance of the scorecard and developer knowing when they come into a planning commission meeting, whether this plan is or is not going to be accepted. And if it doesn't meet the requirements of what the people of La Plata want, the developer don't even burn it, right? Don't waste the time or find a way to create a plan that actually meets, right, the needs of the people of La Plata. So as long as that left and right limit, that intent is hit, I think this document is a great start to ensuring that, again, we're meeting that fundamental shift, we're being proactive in nature, and we're ensuring that those facilities are ready to go for the people of La Plata. So again, thank you. There's a long ways to go, but this is an awesome start. So thank you very much for the speed and the deliberate plan that you have here. Mixing those two is not an easy thing to do. And again, Director Dooley, I think a lot of this goes to you and your staff and Mr. Stevens as well. Thank you both.
Councilman Sampson?
Yeah, I just had 4 or 5 questions. When reviewing the document, it talked about the major development projects of 100 units plus. But I noticed in the language, and that's what I'm most concerned about, it talked about all of the parties, and I'm paraphrasing, coming into agreement. BOE, the county, and the town. So inherent in that, or implied in that, then is that if all of us are not in agreement, what does that mean for a development? Does it stop if any one of those 3 says no, the Board of Education or us or the county? What does that mean?
It could. Yes, sir. It absolutely could. The intent behind that was driven, and that you find that language in the school seat allocation portion of 173. That was one of the things that Charles County Public Schools, when I met with that staff, that they were very interested in, smaller developments, subdivision of a lot into 3 or 5 units. Okay, that's not going to have an immediate dramatic impact on the school system. A development of 100 or more that's approved by the town. And again, we don't have anything to do with the schools. So if we were just to take an action and approve a development and now all of a sudden, it's approved and I call public schools the next day and say, okay, we just approved a development of 100, that doesn't work for them. So they specifically requested that language so that they could have a seat at the table for these larger developments. And this is something that has been done in practice. This is something that the Pine Grove development had to do. So they had to have a separate agreement with Charles County and Charles County Public Schools and the town before they could move forward. So the answer is, sure, there's potential, but I believe that the town and the county and public schools, we all want to work collaboratively with the development and try to find a way to yes. I mean, I don't think anybody on this staff is sitting around looking for a way to no. We want to find a way to yes, but we got to do it responsibly. And what that language will do is it will necessitate and require the developer to come and meet with us and create that additional agreement that's separate and distinct from this code that will address school seat allocations.
Okay, so is it fair to say, just to clarify in my mind, and for developments of 100 or more units, those are automatically deemed collaborative joint efforts, intergovernmental efforts?
The language that's drafted in front of you would require them to enter into a multi-party agreement. Yes, sir.
Oh, you've talked about this a couple times. And I think that the answer is clear, but I just want to make sure in my mind, when we talk about the elimination of the guaranteed minimum of 100 school seat allocator. So as I interpret it, and tell me if I'm wrong, when I interpret that and with the school level crowding, if, say, a development wants to go in, I'm just making this up, say it wants to go in, I don't know, over near the Pine Grove area or something, okay. And it's determined at that time that that will cause school overcrowding. The way I read the school allocation policy, coupled with the elimination of the 100-seat school allocator, we would not approve that development in that part of town. Is that correct? Or am I misreading or misinterpreting?
We wouldn't get into any specific area of the town. What would happen is we would look at all of the schools that students would potentially populate, that they could go to, that the town, I keep saying the feeder schools. We would look there. If there is within any of those 3 schools, anywhere of those tiers, elementary, middle, or high school, if there's 0 capacity, then yes, that development would stop. Okay, but I want to find the language, because this question also came up with the PC, with the Planning Commission, and the specific language, which I'm not going to search for it, I thought I brought it with me tonight, actually says that if public schools has within their capital improvement plan, within the next 18 months, a plan to increase capacity at that school, we can count that capacity. Because the conversation we had with the Planning Commission was, well, could we potentially be saying no over school seats? Yes, potentially we could. The likelihood of that, I think, is incredibly remote, especially given the language that I didn't bring up with the Planning Commission because I couldn't remember it at the time. But that 18-month window of if the public schools already has a capital plan to address a capacity at those schools, we can count that. So what that means in real terms is if it's 0 for a project, that means it's 0 for the next 18 months at least. That means we have a real problem in our community. It's a significant problem. It means not only are we 0, our school's that overcrowded, we're not even able to fix it for the next 2 years. That's a problem. Okay, we should not be allowing that development to go forward right now. Okay, so I think the language that we have in there certainly welcome scrutiny, certainly welcome public feedback on it, but I think it's an elegant solution that the potential to say no is there, but the probability of saying no, I think, is relatively low.
Okay. Just two more things. One, and I don't think this actually fits into the two chapters that you're talking about, but just something I thought about when reading this, that, and this would be punted over to the planning commission to take into consideration. I don't think this would be in a venue per se of the council, but it's just something I thought about. One thing I've noticed, and I'm sure my recollection is probably not accurate, and I'm sure it's happened before, but what I've noticed is this. I cannot recall a time where a developer who has done a traffic study has had their traffic study say that they could not do it, or that there was a change or modification. It was always, it could be done, or there was a modification to do it. So one of the things, and this would just be for the planning commission to consider, would be to have the developer, as they already do, so it wouldn't be a new expense, pay for the traffic study to the town and have the town select the company to do the traffic study. Because like I said, I could not recall, and I'm sure it probably did happen, I just can't remember, but I don't remember any time that has come up negative. It's always been either it can be done or with these modifications, and what was presented to the planning commission is with these modifications, it can be done. So that's just something I would recommend.
And if I could, Counselor, respond a little bit, I think introducing the levels of services which don't exist now, I think really removes that ambiguity. It really provides a quantifiable metric, and the requirement for the APFS, the Adequate Public Facilities Study, we get to dictate the terms of that study. That is something that, a tool that we don't have, and we get to say what's going to be included. So it's not going to be a report that can be subjectively prepared and submitted on behalf of developer. The town is going to be the honest broker on what comes in, and then we have the level of services which are quantifiable grades that we can say definitively whether or not you're degrading our roads. And so I think the language addresses your concern precisely.
Okay. And then the last thing I have, and this may be a one that's plainly obvious, but just to clarify in my mind. So for those developments that are considered large by our standards, like say Pine Grove, and they are grandfathered in. Okay. However, because there are certain parts of the development that's not done, is there a distinction between the master site development plan and the plats within that have to be reapproved? So in other words, and I'll just use Pine Grove because I just said it off the top of my head. There's nothing specific about them, but like say, for whatever reason, they come back and one of their plats or whatever is expired or whatever. Are they now subject to the new rules because of how long just the project took? Or are they just, everything in there is grandfathered? And the other parts of that is if they come with a modification to that plat, not the master site development plan, but to that plat, is that also the case? So those.
John, I'll let you take this one. This is really your lane.
Sure. Yes, Councilman Sampson. How that would work is that if there's any modification to a previously approved, say, plat map, that would then they basically would be subject to the current standards. So things are grandfathered in the way they are, as long as that they have a valid map in this case, then they can proceed with what was approved, and they don't have any particular responsibility to comply with the ordinances that were drafted. But if they come back and they ask for a modification, now they're subject to this. Or if they allow their plat map to expire and they need to have a new approval, then it's subject to the ordinance that we're drafting.
Okay, so So I just want to be clear. So, and I doubt this would happen, but just in case some freak incident or something just got dropped. If by some chance there was a development, plat didn't get renewed, but the match like the development plan was approved, they just, for whatever reason, our position will then be that plat within that master site development plan is now subject to all the new requirements, if that was in place at the time.
Yes, sir.
Correct? Okay. I just wanted to make sure it was clear.
There's a specific section in what we've drafted under for chapter 191. It's 191.92, and that actually addresses that new plats or new major subdivision, or excuse me, new plats, major plats or major site plans have a maximum of 3 years that they're approved for potential allocation. If they become invalid because they haven't got their time extensions, or for whatever reason, if they lose that validity to it, they have to come back and go through this process again under the current or whatever the provisions are that we adopt for this ordinance.
Okay. All right. I'll thank you.
Okay, Councilman Johnson.
Thank you. And to Chuck and staff, you all should not get tired of hearing this. Well done on the concept of this language. I'm sure you want to hear it many more times, but it is clear from what the intent of the parties of the council was. You all talk about the horns and really draft the language that you believe to be in the best interest of the town. As I read through it and I listened to the planning commission meeting, and I hear the comments tonight, I think this is a great opportunity to say that this legislation is a true community base and focus on the community at whole. And to our stakeholders that may be concerned about the language, it should not be seen as language to stop the development. We all recognize that people have the right to use their land, but the town have an obligation to our community to make sure that we grow in a sustainable way through our facilities. There is no question about any of our infrastructure being stressed right now. It is a real thing we're living through. We acknowledge it. We have the capital to approve it, but to not be in this predicament again, like you said, eventually we want the town to be on autopilot. So I really appreciate the work that has been done by staff, the wonderful comments tonight, and the work that the planning commission have done. This is probably our proudest meetings that we get to sit up here and be very enthused about as we speak about this particular language, because it truly is community based. It's not about what the council ran on or what's subjective to council. It's really objective to what the community need right now today and what we know is going to happen in the future. My concern is, and Councilman Sampson touched on this a little bit, if a developer allow their plaque to expire, not to say so be it, but see you in the process. My concern is, now that this language and this conversation is coming about, and we got at least one more public hearing on the planning commission, and then eventually it'll make its way to the council who will decide on the ordinance. What do we do when we see an influx in applications being completed as this language is being drafted?
You know, Counselor, that argument comes up anytime you make any kind of land use code changes, okay? It rarely bears out to be the sky is falling like it's often anticipated, okay? And that's why I think the language around a complete application is very important, because if that's the threshold that we're going to adopt, you can't be sitting at home listening and going, oh my goodness, well, I better get in and get an application. I mean, to have a complete application, you've already been working, you've already been doing a lot of steps to get to that point. And so it rarely materializes that it's going to be as bad as we anticipate. And I'll just go ahead and say it now. If this council thinks that staff's going to come before you and request a moratorium, because that's usually the next thing, it's like, okay, there's going to be a run on the bank, so we need to get a moratorium, and staff is not going to recommend that. I don't see that as being useful. And again, it's never as bad as we anticipate. The applications that do come in that are deemed complete, those are fully thought out projects that someone has already been working on, and they're like, okay, I need to get this in. You're not going to be able to just go, okay, well, I've got that raw piece of land and I need to get it in before the effective date, and then all of a sudden you've got a complete application. That's not going to happen.
I appreciate the explanation. And I generally mean this, great job to staff and the comments and the work that planning commission has done on this. This is, while I'm sure, like you said, we got work to do, this is a really great starting point, and I look forward to the conversation over the coming months.
So, Mr. Stevens, is there anything that the council needs to do, or this was just under matters of information?
No,
So
I mean,
there
this
is-
conversation was the point,
Okay.
to have this conversation in a public forum, in the public domain. I know people are listening. You all know that people are listening. They may not be online tonight, but they're going to pull this recording tomorrow. And I think it's very important that they hear your thoughts and comments, hear my comments and Don's comments. This is a continuation of a conversation that started on June 3rd. So
Right.
we're going to keep having it.
Right.
Thank
Thank you. Very well.
Madam Mayor, before you move on, if I could just ask one more thing, because the public comment session is open still, and people are listening to this and people have offered, right? I think from the comments here tonight, we would benefit, you have talked about bringing the Board of Education folks to come talk to us. I think it would be really productive for us to hear from folks who are at the sort of where the multiple layers of government local government come together with roads, right? With town, county, and state, the convergence of those agencies and issues related to the traffic part of this. This would be a very helpful thing for us to hear from experts in the community on. That's all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for a very productive conversation on this. Next is legislation. It is Resolution 26-06, the Fund Balance Reserve Policy.
All right, council, for your consideration, Resolution 26-06, the Fund Balance Reserve Policy. This is for introduction and consideration of adoption. A resolution concerning the Fund Balance Reserve Policy for the purpose of adopting the Town of La Plata Fund Balance Reserve Policy and all matters relating thereto.
Thank you very much. I will entertain a motion to adopt
So
Resolution
moved.
26-06.
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? If you are in favor, please indicate by saying aye. If not, please say nay.
All right.
All
Aye.
in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And any opposed? Motion carries. Brings us to new business. We will have reports from Mayor and Town Council. We'll start there with Councilman Gutenberg.
All right. So let's see. Obviously, I won't belabor it, but we at the Planning Commission meeting last week.
Really?
Right? So really, I mean, not to keep beating that drum. But actually, one thing that I did want to bring up here, just to put on council's radar, also in that meeting, it was a double-barreled meeting with importance, right? So originally the new library for the town of Plata was coming, and so that ended up getting a continuance to finish out a traffic study. But one of the issues that is important to me related to this project that I want to bring up to the council, because it may be something that we need to consider for future agendas and discuss. But the library site, when you look at it, within 1/8 of a mile of the library, there's over, and I did this myself, right? If you count the number of households that are within 1/8 of a mile radius, there's approximately 350 homes within just 1/8 of a mile of the library. And if you just expand that out to just 1/4 of a mile, both very small numbers, it more than doubles that, right? So you're talking over 700 residential homes that are there. And unfortunately, it is a sidewalk island, right? Like there are sidewalks that are going to be put in around it, but so there's, for decades in the town of La Plata, we've talked about Washington Avenue sidewalks. But that's not, if you look at it, right, like that, and that is a complex problem. But what's a less complex problem to solve related to the library is the North Maple Ave, which is a town street, and with just 1,200 feet of sidewalk, we would connect the library site to Charles Street and the beautiful pedestrian access piece that's going in there that the state is largely funding. And it also is just 300 additional feet with existing sidewalk to the bike path that we're contributing to with the county. And that would open up access to the library site, the predominance of the number of houses I just talked to you about are mostly on the side of the railroad tracks that would need to access, walk around and come down North Maple Ave. And so, we are working with town staff and county, I think, are working together on the traffic remediation pieces, and they're looking at what can be done, with sidewalks. But I think it may be a thing that comes back to us because it is off the library site. And what I'm hoping is, and what I'm asking all of you is like, as we travel this, right, I may want to come back to this council and have conversations about a capital project that would deliver about 1,200 feet of sidewalk down that street to give so many people access to it within walking distance and access to that bike path. So I just wanted to bring that up related to the Planning Commission. And then just, whenever we go to public meetings, we like to report that here. So last night, the members of the 4th and 5th Club did ask a couple of us to come and just speak to them about our experience of being council people since the election. So, just shared some gratitude with them for the access that they gave us in form of letting us all come there and debate public issues and how useful that was, to candidates running for local government, and just kind of talked about through some of the experience of, I kind of was emphasizing the APFO and some of the issues around that and some convergence, some different things there. But anyway, so that was an interesting time. Commissioner Bowling was there as well. So he heard about what we were doing with our APFO and some of those issues, and then just took a few questions from the public. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman McCormick.
Yes, thank you. Quick question for you, Mr. Stevens, on the town manager report, and then I'll get into some of my notes. So I saw a comment, La Plata Police Department Special Operations this month was able to seize $2 million worth of fentanyl and cocaine. Do I have that correct?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, that's really well done. So I want to make sure that was put out on the record. Thank you. Please let the police department, anybody that we worked with, our agents, obviously, that come through and help supplement our force, like really, really well done. Thank you for keeping our community safe. December is a month and January is a month where a lot of us get to either travel or have family come over, and y'all just keep going out there and absolutely crushing it for our community. So really well done. Thank you. And I want to make sure that, one, I had that correct, and two, that got a quick moment here. So obviously December 25th was Christmas. I hope everybody got an opportunity to celebrate, see their families, loved ones, and have a good time doing that. December 26th, as I alluded to a little bit earlier, was National Thank You Day. So thank you to all our town staff, our residents that continue to come here, folks that give public comment and participate in the process to making La Plata the greatest place to live. So thank you, everybody, for your continued trust and everything that y'all do to make this town excellent. January 1st was New Year's Day and the Solemnity of Mary, so got to go into 2026. And one of the things that I'll just share with the council that I kind of find funny is every year I look and I go, there's no way they can make glasses that work with the year number, and every year they surprise me. So glad to see 2026 worked, and looking forward to what 2027's glasses look like in New York City and all the other places that have the big celebrations for New Year's. And then finally, January 9th was National Law Enforcement Day. I know we're celebrating National Law Enforcement Week as well. But again, thank you very much for all that you and the police department does here for La Plata, Charles County, for Charles County, and everybody that puts on that uniform and does that job. So thank you for that. And then finally, there was an article that came out that I know a couple folks in the community have talked about, both online and in person. And that is the property assessments have now come out. And they've obviously moved in direction that, no surprise, are going up, which will eventually impact your taxes. So like Councilman Sampson urged us a couple months ago, if you are eligible for the homestead tax credit cap, please take advantage of that and ensure that you get your application in, fill it out correctly, make sure you meet those requirements and take advantage of that. Again, Maryland caps that number at 10%. Charles County caps it at 7%. La Plata caps it at 7%. So we won't get hit with the full assessment as long as you're eligible and apply for that. But it's still something to help you out. And if you don't apply for it, you may end up losing a couple bucks every month. And that obviously, grows over time. So please take advantage of that. Keep yourself informed with what's happening there and make sure that you go on the correct website and fill that information out. With that, thank you.
Nothing.
Councilman Johnson.
All right, good evening. First, before I start, we have a Parks and Recreation Commission tomorrow morning, or meeting tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. that you are able to join via Teams. I also attended the 4th and 5th Democratic Club, and they asked and they will be reaching out to various members of council just to give an update on how has our experience been since we took office, and it was very healthy conversation. It's about 2 hours that we got to spend with them all, with other local officials. Mr. Stevens, back in November, there was in your operation report, an upgrade or update regarding the Smecco Light project. I don't know if we have a timeline on that yet. I know we reached out with a citizen concern about some light bulbs being out on St. Mary's. They came out and fixed them. However, on LaGrange and St. Mary's, there's about a handful that are still out. And I don't know if it's worth just waiting on the project. I know they was waiting on permission from the Public Service Commission to move forward, but if we just get a timeline on that.
I thought it was going to be in the spring of 2026. I can confirm that, but I will also say that Smecco's been unbelievably responsive. If
Okay.
you go online, if any resident sees a light that's out and it's a street light that's out, go online to Smecco, report that. They've been, I am envious of how quickly they're able to respond and get out there and take care of some of these things. But if there are specific lights in question that are not being addressed, please let me know what they are. Give me a street address or even a pole number off the light, and I'll personally follow up with Smecco and our liaison to make sure that it gets addressed.
Yes, they are. They do respond extremely quick. Just the timeline in terms of the conversion or upgrade will be helpful. Also, is the snowflakes for holiday, is that a town project or a Smecco project?
I think that one is evolving. So, and I might ask Michelle here to weigh in on this because she's got more history with this, but the town didn't have any interaction with the placement of the snowflakes throughout the community this year. I believe that Smecco is going to approach the town to ask us to partner with them in the future.
Okay. What I'm getting at is I was hope that when we put them up, we ensure that they work. There's a handful on Charles Street that are just out and have been out since they put them up. Not a major point, but just, if we're going to put them up, make sure they work. Appreciate that. I don't have any other comments, and thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And my comments will be brief. Okay, watch this. First of all, just Happy New Year to everyone. We got to do that, 2 hours in, right? I had the great honor over the weekend to present recognition to Lucas Alberry for his Eagle Scout project, and he became an Eagle Scout as well. His projects are the ones that are the 3 boxes throughout La Plata that you can retire your well-loved American flag so that they are properly and respectfully retired. So it was a really nice ceremony there. And tomorrow, the big day starts here in Maryland. It's legislative session. So for the next 90 days, it's going to be quite busy, especially up in Annapolis. So just know that, keep an eye on everything that's going on, because your delegation, your congressmen, your senators will be working hard. And with that, that's the end of my brief report. And we have a reason to go into closed session, so I will entertain a motion from someone to make a motion to go into closed session. Anybody who would like to?
Sure. I make a motion to go into closed session for statutory authority 3-305B1I to discuss the employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of an appointee, employee, or official over whom
It has jurisdiction.
it has jurisdiction over, with the topic being appointment of the town attorney. I printed 2 sheets on my agenda, not 3, so my apology. Go ahead, let me, here it is. May I start over?
Just the last the topic and the reason for
Yeah,
closure
the
would
topic
be.
would be town attorney appointment, reason for closure, to consider the appointment of a candidate as town attorney. My apologies. I was not reading the electronic version.
Thank you very much. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, we will do roll call. If you are in favor of going into closed session for said reason, please indicate by saying aye. If not, please indicate in the negative. Madam Town Clerk, would you please do a roll call?
Councilman Gutenberg,
Aye.
Councilman McCormick,
Aye.
Councilman Sampson,
Aye.
Councilman Johnson,
Yes.
Mayor James.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you very much. And I officially adjourn this meeting at 19:58, so 7:58 PM. Thank you so much.
Chapter 17?
No, E-7-9.